I guess you never expect to hear it's over in the middle of a Tuesday. I was slicing up some mangoes at the kitchen island. She was sitting across from me on her phone, typing fast. Then she looked up, just for a second, and said it like she was commenting on the weather. I think it's over. Not crying, not angry, not even cold. Just done. I didn't say a word. I put the knife down gently, wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked out of the house. No suitcase, no coat. I got in my car and drove off. I think she expected a fight, a speech, maybe a desperate why, or a pathetic let's talk. But I gave her silence. And in that silence, I could almost hear her shock. Let me rewind. Her name is Carly. We've been married 12 years. We don't have kids, our choice. Or at least that's what I thought. She used to say we were enough for each other. She made jokes about how boring parenthood looked on social media. We travel, eat out, host game nights. People called us the power couple. But something shifted in the last year. Subtle things. Cold coffee cups left on the windowsill. An extra 30 minutes at work. Her phone never left her hand anymore. And I noticed she started wearing perfume to go to the gym. Once, I asked how her day was, and she blinked like I was interrupting a dream. What? I tried to chalk it up to stress. She worked at a firm that was downsizing. I brought home flowers on a random Thursday. She smiled and said, "Did you do something wrong?" I laughed, pretending that didn't sting. 3 weeks ago, I found a pair of sunglasses in her car's glove box. Men's, not mine. She said they belonged to her coworker, Michael, who she carpooled with. I shrugged. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who freaks over every detail. But the gut feeling wouldn't let up. You know the one, that slow churn behind your ribs that won't go away even when everything looks fine. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I logged into our shared iCloud account. We'd set it up years ago when we both got new phones. She probably forgot it even existed. And that's when everything changed. I didn't find photos. I found voice memos. She recorded them like diary entries. One of them was titled March 2nd Confession. I remember that date. It was the night I surprised her with a steak dinner after she came home late. I thought we had a nice evening. I even gave her a foot rub. In the recording, she said, "I can't believe how easy it is to lie to him. I just got back from Daniel's place. And he had no idea. I feel guilty but also free." Daniel. That name meant nothing to me at the time. But the next memo did. Daniel says he wants me to leave him soon. I told him I'd handle it. I just need to figure out how to do it without drama. I listened to 6 more of those voice memos in my parked car at midnight in the lot outside a 24-hour Walgreens. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there listening to the woman I thought I knew talk about dismantling our marriage like she was canceling a gym membership. Still, I didn't confront her. Something in me wanted to see where it would go, how long she'd keep the mask on, how far she'd push the silent game. And today she played her hand. It's over. Just like that. So I left. And here's the twist. She doesn't know what I know. She thinks she ended things. But the truth is, I had already left her the moment I heard those words on the recordings. I just stayed long enough to see how she'd end it, how far she'd go. She thought she won. She thought she held the power, but I walked away on my terms. And she never expected that. After I drove off that day, I didn't go far. I parked 2 blocks away, just out of sight. It wasn't that I wanted to spy. I just wasn't ready to go anywhere yet. I sat in the car for almost an hour, engine off, watching the street, listening to my own heartbeat like it was ticking down to something I hadn't yet figured out. And then I saw it. A black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of our house. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, casual button-up, rolled sleeves, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. He didn't knock. He walked in. I didn't need confirmation. I knew that was Daniel. Carly had never said his name out loud in front of me. But somehow I just knew. The way he walked in like he belonged. The way he barely glanced over his shoulder. The way she timed her "it's over" moment with precision right before he arrived. It wasn't just an ending. It was a handoff. Still, I didn't move. I watched. I watched as 30 minutes passed and the SUV sat there quiet. like it had secrets of its own. I watched as a curtain in our bedroom fluttered slightly. I watched the second-floor light turn off, and still I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My hands were calm. My pulse was steady, but I was cold. Some strange kind of internal frost that started in my chest and crept through my arms. I drove to a motel that night. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't call my brother. I didn't want explanations or advice or pity. I just wanted silence. And for once in that marriage, I had it. The next morning, I turned on my phone. 5 texts from Carly. All short. Where are you? Did you take your car or Uber? Call me. You can't just walk off like that. Seriously, what are you doing? And then nothing. Hours passed. I stared at the blank ceiling of the motel room until my eyes blurred. I finally replied with just one sentence. I heard everything, Carly. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. I didn't get a reply for another 2 hours. When it came, it was longer. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was predictably a lie. You're not making sense. I think you're just overwhelmed. Let's meet and talk. Okay, there it was. The pivot, the gaslight, the attempt to make me feel like the unstable one. But here's what she didn't know. I had already downloaded every one of her voice memos. I had copied them to a secure drive along with screenshots of her messages to Daniel. I had quietly started moving money from our joint accounts into one I'd opened years ago during our house renovation. She thought she was in control. She didn't realize I'd been steps ahead since the first memo. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a specialist in high-asset divorces. I didn't want drama, but I wanted clarity. I needed a plan. The lawyer, Angela, was calm, sharp, and as surgical as you'd hope someone in her position would be. I told her everything. About the recordings, the messages, the moment at the kitchen island, the SUV. She nodded through it all, asked a few key questions, and then said something I'll never forget. She ended it. That's good. That means we file first, and that means you control the narrative. It was the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe. Over the next 48 hours, I moved quietly. I collected paperwork. I transferred what was legally mine. I even boxed up some personal items. Childhood mementos, a few watches my grandfather had given me, a small painting from our first trip to Santa Fe. I left everything else behind. I didn't go back home. I didn't tell Carly anything more. I let her sit in that silence. Let it stretch and grow heavy, like the kind of quiet that feels louder than shouting. She texted again on the 3rd day. This time it was different. I'm sorry. Panicked. I didn't mean it like that. Too late. This wasn't just a marriage ending. It was a truth being revealed. The moment I stepped out that door, I stepped out of the illusion I had been living in for far too long. And now I was just getting started. By the 5th day, Carly was unraveling. I hadn't blocked her. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most unsettling thing you can do to someone who thrives on control is nothing at all. No response, no engagement, just pure silence. She didn't know where I was, and every hour that passed without an answer made her messages longer, sloppier, and more desperate. First came the guilt bait. I don't know why you're doing this. You scared me. You don't just leave someone like that. It's cruel. We've been through too much for this kind of behavior. Then the guilt flipped into frustration. If you're trying to punish me, fine, but this is childish. You never cared about solving things clearly. Daniel says you're spiraling, and I think you were too. There it was. His name written, sent. She slipped up. She had kept him a secret for months. And now that the walls were collapsing, she finally brought him into the open. She didn't know I had already listened to the voice memos where she called him her escape hatch. She didn't know I'd heard her whisper how excited she was that I was too slow to notice anything. She didn't know I'd read the message where she told him, he's not going to survive this emotionally, but I won't be the one holding the bag when it happens. Every time I reread that line, I felt this strange, detached curiosity, like I was watching someone describe the planned dismantling of a stranger. Not me. That's what happens when you emotionally disconnect from someone. You no longer feel like the person they're talking about. You become the observer, the analyst, and in some ironic way, the silence becomes your shield. That same week, my lawyer filed for divorce. No warning, no discussion, just the delivery of a packet to her inbox from a firm with a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. Angela timed it perfectly. She filed right after Carly's firm announced that it was downsizing its local branch. That meant her employment status was shaky at best. And the moment she received the divorce documents, her panic spilled over into phone calls. 12 in one day, none of which I answered. I wasn't trying to break her. I was just finished giving her the power to explain herself on her own timeline. The night she received the filing, she showed up at my motel. I don't know how she found it. Maybe she guessed. Maybe she tracked me. Either way, I was standing at the vending machine in the hallway when I saw her reflection in the glass door. She looked different. No makeup, hoodie, hair tied back. For the first time in years, she looked like the woman I met before all the games began. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, "Can we talk?" I stayed quiet. She stepped closer. "Look, I know I handled this badly, but you walking away like that, it's not okay." I finally turned and looked her in the eye. "You ended it, Carly. I just agreed with you." She opened her mouth to speak but stopped. For the first time, maybe ever, she had nothing to say. That silence, the one she'd weaponized for months, now sat between us like a wall she couldn't climb. She tried one last time. Daniel and I, it wasn't real. Not like what we had. Panicked. It got messy, but we can fix this. That's when I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the version of herself that looked good standing next to me. I shook my head slowly. "No, Carly, you already broke it. Now I'm just setting the pieces down." Then I walked past her. Back to my room. Back to my silence. Back to my life. And she stood there, frozen in the hallway of a motel she never thought she'd step into. Finally realizing that I was no longer hers to manipulate. And that realization, it shattered her more than any scream ever could. After the motel hallway encounter, Carly didn't try to come back again. She must have realized then, maybe for the first time in her adult life, that she couldn't fix this with charm, with guilt, or with crocodile tears. And so, she pivoted. She started telling people stories. Within days, mutual friends began texting me strange things like, "Hey, heard you just walked out on her with no warning. That's rough, man." She told me she was blindsided by you disappearing. Blindsided. She stood there and told me it was over. And now she was painting herself as the abandoned wife, the loyal partner who got dumped and left to pick up the pieces. I didn't take the bait. I didn't correct anyone. I just saved the screenshots. See, Carly had always been good at shaping narratives. She could twist anything into something that sounded almost believable, even when it wasn't. But what she forgot, what people like her always forget, is that receipts don't lie. And I had plenty: voice recordings, screenshots, GPS logs from her phone I'd quietly sync to an old laptop, bank statements. Everything I'd need if she ever pushed things into court. But I didn't want revenge. I just wanted out. Angela, my lawyer, kept the process airtight. She advised silence unless legally necessary. "Let her run out of steam," she told me. "People like this usually do." And she was right. 2 weeks after filing, Carly finally sent me something real. A short, formal message, no emotion, no manipulation, just a sentence. "Please have your lawyer contact mine." I read it twice. It was the first honest thing she'd said in months. The game was over. Not just the marriage, the performance, the mask, the need to pretend. And all it took was walking away without a word. Because the truth doesn't need volume. It just needs to be heard once, and it echoes long after the noise stops. About a month into the divorce process, I thought I'd seen it all. I'd accepted that Carly was going to rewrite the past to make herself feel better. I'd accepted that the version of me she told people about wasn't real, and I was okay with that. I wasn't looking for validation. I was looking for peace. But then something happened that shook me all over again. I was standing in line at the grocery store when I ran into someone I hadn't seen in almost a year, Maya, one of Carly's oldest friends. The last time I saw her, she was at our housewarming party. Carly always said she was too blunt for her own good. She looked me up and down and raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you out in public. Carly made it sound like you'd basically moved into a cave. I gave her a tight smile. Still paying for food like the rest of the world. She tilted her head. So it's true then? You just left her without a word. I didn't answer. I just stared at her because there was something behind her eyes. Hesitation. Guilt. Curiosity. She folded her arms and said, "Look, I'm not picking sides, but I told her she was an idiot. You were the one person who ever gave her a damn backbone." I blinked. That caught me off guard. Then she leaned closer and said quietly, "Daniel, he's already texting someone else. Carly doesn't know yet, but I thought you should." I almost laughed. Of course he was. Carly had risked everything for a man who didn't even wait until the ink dried on her story. It wasn't that I wanted her to hurt, but hearing that hit me with a strange sense of closure I didn't expect. She hadn't just betrayed me. She gambled and lost. And then Maya kept talking. She told me everything, you know? The memos, the cheating, the plan. She said she wanted to feel alive again. That she was bored. She thought you were too passive. That one stung. Passive. She mistook patience for passivity, stability for stagnation. I wasn't boring. I was consistent. I gave her trust, space, freedom, and she used all of that to plan her exit while I made her coffee every morning. She said she thought you wouldn't fight back, that you'd just roll over. Maya paused again. But I told her, what if he doesn't fight at all? What if he just walks away? I looked at her and finally said, "That's exactly what I did." She nodded. And it's driving her insane. When I got back to my car, I sat there for a long time with the windows down, watching people walk by. I felt a strange mix of grief and power. Grief for the version of Carly I once believed in. Power in knowing I had dismantled her game without ever lifting my voice. And more importantly, I realized something else that day. People like Carly don't expect peace. They prepare for war, arguments, fireworks. But when you give them silence, they're left alone with the truth they tried to run from. And Daniel? He was just her distraction from it. A week after running into Maya, I got an email from Carly. Not a text, not a call, an email. Cold, precise, written like a business proposal wrapped in emotional manipulation. She opened with, "I hope you're in a better place mentally." That alone told me everything about her mindset. I hadn't broken down. I hadn't screamed. So, she assumed I was in crisis. She continued, "I think it's time we try to part ways with understanding, not anger. What happened between us was complicated. But I never intended to hurt you." That last line, I actually laughed out loud. She hadn't intended to hurt me, just cheat on me, lie to me for months, record secret voice memos about how easy it was to deceive me, and coordinate her emotional exit behind my back. But I didn't reply. My lawyer had already advised me. Once people like her realize their old tactics aren't working, they'll try to control the narrative with grace. Still control, just cleaner. Instead, I focused on my own life. I started seeing a therapist, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand why I hadn't seen it coming. I wanted to know how a decade of love, travel, laughter, and shared dreams could be rewritten so easily by one person while the other was still living inside it like it was real. And I learned something powerful. Betrayal doesn't begin with the lie. It begins with silence. Carly's betrayal didn't start when she slept with Daniel. It started when she stopped sharing her mind with me, when her thoughts became hers alone, when she started hiding instead of resolving. That was the real fracture. Meanwhile, the divorce moved forward smoothly. She didn't contest anything. I think she was too embarrassed or too afraid of what would come out if this went to court. Angela had built the case airtight, and Carly must have known it. But then another twist. One of Carly's coworkers messaged me on LinkedIn. Out of nowhere, she introduced herself politely and said, "I know this is strange, but I thought you should know there are rumors going around the office that you cheated on Carly and that she's divorcing you because of emotional abuse. I don't believe it, but she's telling everyone you left her after years of neglect." I sat with that for a moment. Years of neglect? I was the one who planned date nights, who took care of her when she got sick, who covered bills when she took a leave from work to focus on herself. That message hit hard, but not because it hurt. Confirmed something. Carly wasn't trying to rebuild her life. She was trying to erase mine from her story. That was her survival tactic. If she could turn me into the villain, then she didn't have to face what she'd done. She didn't have to admit to her friends, her family, her coworkers, or even to herself that she lit the match and burned it all down. She didn't expect me to disappear without a word. She didn't expect me to stay silent, calm, and composed. But what she really didn't expect was that I'd rebuild my life without her and never once look back. And that realization, I suspect, will haunt her longer than any consequence ever could. The thing about truth is, it doesn't vanish just because someone stops acknowledging it. It lingers, and eventually it finds a way out. About 2 months into the divorce, I got an unexpected call. Not from Carly, from her younger sister, Leah. I hadn't spoken to Leah since the holidays over a year ago. She was quieter than Carly, more observant. She used to joke that Carly could talk her way out of a crime scene if she had 5 minutes and a clean shirt. So, when her name popped up on my phone, I hesitated. I picked up. "Hey, I know this is awkward," she began, "but I needed to talk to you." She didn't waste time. "I know what Carly's been saying about you. I know what she told Mom and our friends and her coworkers. And honestly, I'm embarrassed." That caught me off guard. I didn't say anything. So she went on. "She told everyone you abandoned her, that you were emotionally distant, unstable, even cold. But I remember the way you treated her, how you tried every holiday to make things special. And the thing that's been bothering me," she used to slip up, say little things like, "I could get away with murder and he'd still make me breakfast in the morning." I remembered that line. She'd said it once after an argument. I thought she was joking. She played you and she thinks people will just buy her version, but I don't. And neither do a few others. Leah told me Carly had tried to get ahead of the story, not just socially but financially too. She'd apparently told her family she was entitled to more than half our assets because she gave up years of her life supporting me. That was a laughable claim. I paid for most of our life, gave her space when she didn't want to work, covered her insurance, and handled all our taxes and legal documents. Support? She hadn't lifted a finger on that front in years. But now that people were starting to piece together the truth, the cracks were forming in her carefully crafted mask. The final blow came unexpectedly. Carly's former boss, yes, former, reached out through a mutual connection. He'd gotten wind of the situation because apparently Carly tried to list him as a character witness for the divorce. He refused. But more importantly, he confirmed something no one else had. "Daniel isn't new. He told me they were already flirting when you and Carly came to the holiday party 2 years ago. The way she looked at him, it was uncomfortable. 2 years. That meant the betrayal had started earlier than I even imagined. And she had kept up the performance with such precision that I never suspected a thing. Not really. Not until those recordings. Not until she looked me in the eye across that kitchen island and delivered that line like it was a favor. It's over. As if I hadn't already figured that out on my own. But here's what really shocked me. After everything, after the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, I wasn't angry. I was sad. Not for me, for her. Because Carly had everything. A stable life, a loyal partner, a future she could have helped shape. And she threw it away for cheap excitement and the illusion of control. She gambled it all for someone who didn't stick around, and a version of herself that never truly existed. And now she was left with a house full of silence, a crumbling reputation, and the echo of my absence. She never expected me to walk away quietly, but she also never expected that in doing so, I'd leave behind something far louder than words. The truth. Unshakable, undeniable, and absolutely hers to live with. It's been 6 months since Carly looked me in the eye and said, "It's over." 6 months since I walked out of that house and chose silence over chaos. Since I decided I'd rather be alone with the truth than surrounded by lies in my own home. And you know what? It was the best decision I've ever made. First, it was hard. I won't lie. The mornings were quiet in a way that felt hollow. I'd wake up and expect to hear the sound of her making coffee or humming a song she'd forget the lyrics to halfway through. My toothbrush looked lonely next to the empty space where hers used to be. But eventually, the silence became something else. It became peace. I moved into a small apartment at the edge of town. Nothing flashy, just enough space for me, my books, and the life I was beginning to rebuild. I bought furniture I actually liked. I started cooking meals I never used to try because she didn't like them. I put art on the walls that made me feel calm, not just what matched the aesthetic she chased online. And one day I laughed, a real, full laugh. I was watching some dumb comedy show with a cup of tea in hand, and I just laughed. And that was the moment I realized I was healing. The divorce finalized without any courtroom fireworks. She got what she was entitled to. I let her go without a fight. The whole thing, in the end, was quiet just like how I walked out. But what surprised me most was how little I thought about her once it was done. Not because I hated her, because I didn't. I just stopped needing anything from her. Not closure, not explanation, not apology, and not love. I started hiking again, something I hadn't done in years. I joined a book club at the local library where no one knew my story or my past. I met people who didn't see me as Carly's husband, just as me. One of them was a woman named Elise. She wasn't flashy. She didn't play games. She loved dogs, collected vintage postcards, and always carried a paperback novel in her purse. We met over a spilled coffee at the library cafe. Literally, I knocked it right out of her hand. The first time I told her I'd been married before, she just smiled and said, "Then I bet you know what matters and what doesn't." That was all. And slowly, with no pressure, no expectations, we started building something that felt like the opposite of everything I'd just come from. It was light, easy, safe. But the real victory, it wasn't Elise. It wasn't even the healing. It was the version of myself I became when I chose not to chase someone who didn't value me. When I walked away from drama without looking back. When I protected my peace instead of fighting to prove a point. People ask sometimes if I regret staying as long as I did with Carly. And honestly, no. Because that chapter taught me everything I needed to know about myself. It taught me that silence can be powerful. That walking away isn't weak, it's wise. That love without respect isn't love at all. And that sometimes the best way to win is not to play the game at all. So yes, she said it was over. But in truth, that's when everything really began.